Welcome to The Explainer. Today we are diving deep. I mean, really deep. We're going on a journey into the tiny, microscopic world that makes you, well, you. We're talking about the fundamental building block of everything that lives, the cell. So, here's the game plan. First, we're going to tackle the secret to being alive itself. Then we'll get into the big idea that ties all of biology together. After that, we'll look at the two basic designs for life, take a little tour inside a cell, check out its control center, and finally, kind of zoom out to see the whole amazing picture. All right, so let's jump right in with a question that sounds super simple, but is actually incredibly profound. So what is it? What's the one thing that separates a living creature from, a rock? It's a massive question, right? But the answer is surprisingly simple. And yet, it's the foundation for literally all the crazy complexity we see in the living world. And that answer? It's the cell. That's it. This tiny, self-contained marvel is the smallest possible unit of life. Think about that. Anything less than a complete cell just can't make it on its own. It's the absolute baseline for being alive. Okay, so how on earth did we figure all this out? Well, it wasn't some single aha moment. Nope, it was a slow burn, taking the work of several brilliant minds to piece together what we now call the cell theory. It really kicked off back in the 1830s. You had Matthias Schleiden, a botanist, who's looking at plant after plant and seeing the same thing, cells. Then just a year later, a zoologist, Theodor Schwann, does the same for animals. He's like, wait a minute, it's cells all the way down here too. They figured out cells were universal. But the final crucial piece of the puzzle, that came from Rudolf Virchow, who declared that all cells have to come from, well, other cells. And boom, that's it. Those discoveries give us the two core rules of modern cell theory. Rule 1, if it's alive, it's made of cells or stuff that cells make. Rule 2, every single new cell is just a descendant of an older cell. It's so simple, so elegant, but man, was it revolutionary. Right, so we've established that all life is built from cells. But here's the twist. Not all cells are created equal. They basically follow two very different blueprints. And the biggest difference, the major dividing line, in all of life, really, just comes down to one thing, the nucleus. You've got eukaryotic cells, that's us, plants, fungi, and we keep our precious genetic material locked up safe in a nucleus. Then you've got prokaryotic cells, think bacteria. They're way simpler, kind of letting their DNA just float around inside. It's a huge distinction. And you can really see that complexity here. Eukaryotic cells are like bustling miniature cities. They're packed with all these different internal compartments and specialized structures called organelles, and every single one has a very specific job to do. So, why don't we do just that? Let's take a tour. We're going to go inside one of these complex eukaryotic cells and really explore this bustling city within. Okay, first stop on our tour, the city limits, or the cell membrane. Now, don't picture a rigid wall. It's more like a smart, flexible border patrol. It's a fluid barrier that acts as a super selective gatekeeper, carefully controlling absolutely everything that comes in or goes out. Once we're past that gatekeeper, we find ourselves in the cytoplasm. You can think of this as the main arena, the factory floor of our cellular city. This is where the action happens, where all the millions of chemical reactions that keep the cell alive and kicking are going down. But what's powering all this nonstop activity? Well, for that, you need to meet the mitochondria. You've probably heard them called the powerhouses of the cell, and for good reason. They take fuel and, through a process called aerobic respiration, turn it into ATP. That's basically the universal energy currency, the little battery packs that drive almost everything the cell does. And get this for a cool fact, mitochondria actually have their own separate DNA, which has led scientists to think they might have once been their own separate organisms. How wild is that? And just like any big city, our cell has a whole production and logistics network. You've got these tiny factories called ribosomes that are constantly building proteins. Then there's the endoplasmic reticulum, or ER, which is this huge network that helps make and transport those proteins and other stuff. And finally, you have the Golgi apparatus, which is basically the cell's post office. It sorts, packages, and ships materials exactly where they need to go. Okay, but with all this going on, someone has to be in charge, right? All these different parts need directions, a master plan to follow. And that brings us to the most critical stop on our tour, City Hall, the command center, the nucleus. This little organelle was first spotted way back in 1831 by Robert Brown. It's got a double membrane, and its whole job, its one vital purpose, is to protect and manage the cell's most precious cargo, the genetic blueprint, the DNA. It is, without a doubt, the director of the whole show. And that blueprint, of course, is DNA. Now, most of the time, it's kind of just hanging out as a loose, messy tangle of fibers called chromatin. But when it's time for the cell to divide, that's when things get organized. All that material gets tightly coiled up and packaged with proteins into these superstructured things we call chromosomes. Okay, get ready for a number that's going to blow your mind. 2 meters. That's about 6.5 feet. That is the length of the DNA thread that is packed inside every single one of your microscopic cells. Just pause and think about that. It's an absolutely incredible feat of biological engineering. All right, let's pull back. We've seen the parts, so let's zoom out and see how this whole incredible orchestra comes together to create the phenomenon we call life. You've got the selective membrane, the power-generating mitochondria, the nucleus calling the shots. Every single part has its own specific job. But, and this is the key, they don't work alone. They all operate in this beautifully coordinated concert, working together to create one single, living, functioning entity. So the really crucial takeaway here is that this intricate, super organized little city, the cell, is the secret to life. It's the common architecture, the basic blueprint that you'll find in every single living thing on this planet, from the teeniest bacterium to a massive blue whale.